The following was recorded during the COVID-19 pandemic through Zoom meetings in accordance with local health guidelines. Hi, I'm Mike Maloney, and welcome to this special edition of the CSRM Podcast with Dr. Greg Linville and Andrew Fouts.
Hi, welcome back to another CSRM Podcast. Greg Linville with you here, and I'm with my trusted sidekick and good friend, Andrew Fouts. Andrew has always been a great associate producer of the CSRM Podcast and all that we do in this digital world. But we're going to turn the tables a little bit today, and Andrew, you're going to kind of direct us a little bit here, because CSRM is in a transition time, and we are very much thinking about how can we communicate this to the folks that are out there that watch us on a regular basis. Some real exciting stuff, but Andrew, great to be with you.
Great to be with you. We've most of you that have been listening or watching for a while probably have noticed us playing around a little bit with this transition and what it looks like and how we're trying to communicate that to you over the past 4 or 5 years that I've been around. And even, the board came to you, Greg, even a year before I even showed up on the scene. And so that's what we want to take a little bit of time today and kind of share with everybody what's going on, let everybody know what to expect, what direction we're going, and just make sure everybody's on the same page, as well as us be able to celebrate some new things and some exciting things we got going on here. So that's a Greg, let's start off. Just give everybody an update. Like you said, we've been kind of transitioning and in some weird transitioning states for the past 6 years or so. The board gave some very clear direction, though, as far as what direction we want to be going as far as an organization. So why don't you give us a little bit of some detail, or at least a picture of what they've handed you?
Yeah, that's right. We are into what we call a re-envisioning of CSRM. So what does that mean? Well, we started, we don't really know, 25, 27 years ago, and it kind of depends if you say, well, you were at the SOA conference in that hotel in Atlanta, and a whole bunch of local church recreators and church sports ministers got together, or was it, do we date it from the day that our board first met? But we're 20 some years old. We're heading towards 30. And what we're finding now is things change, don't they? And so about 6 years ago, the board, with a lot of pushing from me, well, it didn't have to push too much, but I was certainly supportive of the fact that we have to adapt, we have to change. CSRM has to stay current, and things don't stay the same, and so we need to adapt. So go ahead.
I was going to say, this really is something that we've talked about. Even those of you that have been following our regular podcast episodes in your book, Fundamentals of Sports Outreach, with the fourfold rubric of being strategically relevant. Yes. And just to clear things up also, some of you may not know, if you're a newer listener or newer follower of CSRM, most of you probably recognize Greg now as the director of our resource department. He's, the executive producer for Overwhelming Victory, Flix, Overwhelming Victory Radio. He's the executive editor for OVP. But when the board came to him 6 years ago, he was serving his 10th term of what was supposed to be a very short term stint as our executive director. And so that's part of why a lot of these things are coming out of the board and Greg's vision, even though most of you now probably recognize him more in our resource chair. He's been involved from the beginning and has been very influential for all of this, and we're very thankful that he has been. So, Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, and so I appreciate that, and boy, it's been a blessing to have this board just continue to show their appreciation for me and confidence in me. But we all knew a number of years ago that we needed next generation leadership. And as you said, we've got to continue to be strategically relevant and obviously efficiently effective in what we do. And so the board said, we're going to re-envision, we're going to recreate CSRM. We did some research and people responded to us and said, oh yeah, you got to be there. Now I'm going to give you an illustration there, Andrew. Sometimes the people that said you got to be there, in fact, will forget one of the sports ministers said, I may only contact you once in 10 years, but when I need you, I need you. And you've done a good job of preparing us and equipping us and enabling us, resourcing us. We can do this a lot on our own, but every now and then there's something that isn't in a book, something that's not on the internet. I can't Google search it. And I need the people that have walked this road before. And so even though I may not need you every day, I've already got all the books on my shelf, I've had them there for a number of years, I just need you. And that resonated with a lot of us because there was some thinking, had CSRM's time come and gone, and that we had got what we needed to get done, and then we needed to just fade away. And it came back pretty strong in our research that people said, no, you need to be there. So what the board envisioned 5 or 6 years ago was a transition from where we are to where we need to go, and what we were to who we needed to become. And it was in 3 basic streams. The first was to deal with staff. The second one was in the development of resources. And the third then was financing and funding it. And so the second one, resources, was not the resources that we needed to keep going forward, but the resources that we needed to create and provide and disseminate for other people. So in that first one, and you mentioned it in kind of your intro, that you weren't there during that time, but you came on after that time. And that's part of it, that the CSRM board envisioned a staff that would grow numerically and probably get some different seats on the bus, as they say. In other words, for me, I was the executive director. I started as the executive director 1999 or something, and just kept going. And then we needed to get a new executive director. And while I'm not riding into the sunset, so to speak, my horse is facing west. Everybody knows that. A little bit of the gray in the beard helps people understand that.
I think you described it with Brian Mason as you were going into the 2-minute warning before the fourth quarter.
Yeah, he talks about even the third and fourth quartile of life in his new book, and we recommend that to you, Maintaining Pace. So the board was saying, stay with us, help connect the past to the current and the future, but let's make sure that we do this in a systematic way. And so they envisioned that within about 2 to 3 years of that initial 5 or 6 years ago, that we would look for a new executive director, and then we would reposition some people on the bus, and we would add new people. And so on that first stream of this whole change and this whole transition, we have grown. We are now, it's a moving target because we add 3 staff this month and 1 rotates off for some reason. But we're in that 40, and that number of 40, and it oversells it a little bit. 6 of them are staff emeritus that have retired. These are the Roger Oswalds, Mark Wagentewers, Todd James of the world, Brian Mason. These are folks that they've retired maybe from an active every day, but they're still with us, and they get to choose their own job description. The only thing they have to do is pray for CSRM. Roger will come to the conferences and present, and Todd is doing all kinds of consulting kinds of things. Brian's writing the books. So we've got those staff emeritus. We've also got some associate staff that are volunteers, and some of them are working to come on our staff. But yeah, so staff, is growing. And boy, where would we be without you today and all that you're helping us with?
Well, I want to, before we move into the second stream, go back to our staff emeritus, our board emeritus. We have a lot of emeritus positions, and this is kind of part of what we wanted to talk a little bit on today. In addition to everything else, is that one thing that is becoming increasingly more common and we're hearing about is this generation gap in ministry. You've got people my age that are trying to get into ministry. You have people that are much wiser aged as you, that are trying to figure out where they're going with it. And there's kind of this competition that has started developing within the ministry world, at least in the occupational ministry world. And part of what we are trying to do within CSRM, again, as far as why we're here to be an example, to train and equip, is to show the fact that we believe in the idea of completing each other's ministries and not competing against them. You want to speak into that a little bit more?
Well, you're very astute, and it is part of our whole philosophical approach. And going back to our three-tier paradigm, that level one Christocentric theological truths, we know that the Bible teaches that there has to be a passing on of the faith and a passing on of leadership. And so philosophically then, this is what we have tried to implement at every level within CSRM. And we call it our 4M approach. And that's year one or phase one, season one. Model it. Watch me do it. And even in some of what you and I are doing now, you've watched me do this for the last year or three. And then the second M is, after I model it, I'm then going to mentor it. And that means we're going to do it together. You're doing some of it, I'm doing some of it, we're doing it together. And then that third season or year is where I motivate it. I monitor it. I jumped ahead. I monitor it, where I'm now watching you do it. I may still be involved every now and then, but I'm really then watching, and I'm there and saying, you know what? You need to sharpen that up a little bit, or that was really great, but I'm watching. And then the motivated comes, I'm not even on the screen, so to speak, but I'm there for reference. I'm there for whatever reasons. And so we found that this is really a positive role model for leadership development. And if the sports minister is watching this or a senior pastor is watching this, this can be applied at every single level of ministry. And it's based on that theological premise of the Barnabas, Paul, and Timothy, and even Jesus to Barnabas, to Paul, to Timothy. There's good evidence that Barnabas was one of those 60 that were sent out two by Jesus. And if you watch him through Acts, he was really the mentor to both Paul and Peter and James. He mentored all those guys, but he was willing to step back when it was necessary and allow those guys to step forward. And then, obviously, they learned. And Peter turned it over to John Mark, who wrote his gospel, the Gospel of Mark. It's really the Gospel of Peter, some of the letters. Paul with Timothy, Titus, Epaphroditus. I mean, we start to talk about names it's hard for us to pronounce even, that Paul really grabbed it from Barnabas. Yeah, so that's where we're at, and that's what we're trying to do within CSRM. And one thing that is really impactful, I think, for people is this emeritus idea, because most of the time it's just resign and go away. But we recognize so much. Where would we be today without Todd James, without Roger Oswald, without Barb? I mean, these people still impact CSRM. And we're open to many of our board and staff members to stay involved with us as emeritus. So we really value that. But we also know that that generation can't hold on to the reins forever. They're there to give it away. So that's what we're doing. And that's what we're doing even now with this Overwhelming Victory Radio.
And I was going to say, this is a good segue into even the second stream of resourcing, because a lot of what we ask our staff emeritus to do, our board emeritus, whatever level they're at, is to actually be involved in the process of, writing down their wisdom, recording their wisdom, however it looks. So that way we can continue the process through with my generation, and hopefully then, my generation's a little bit more technologically advanced, so we're hopefully able to record it even more, but we're able to continue to build each other up and build on the foundations that were, laid out ahead of us. What you mentioned, Todd James, we believe this is going to be released here in the middle of March Madness still. He is Mr. March Madness, and he has a great little pamphlet he wrote, I don't even know, 20 years ago.
Decades
ago, that is still strategically relevant and efficiently effective. It's free off the CSRM website, called Meet My Head Coach.
Meet My Head Coach.
That little simple pamphlet has impacted, thousands of people across the globe, because it's been translated multiple times. And
probably millions of people.
Yeah. And he offers it freely to CSRM to use and to develop and to hand out. This is why we like to use the word of, we look for completing each other's ministries and not competing against them.
Yeah, and let's talk about that just for a quick second, because you're so astute on that. And it's too often in ministry, it's like, oh, I got to keep up with them, or I got to keep up with them, or I've got to do better than them. And I think that we have even modeled this with some of the other, what we would call para ministries. This is how Reach came about, with Uncharted Waters, our good friend Tim Conrad there, and Bob Schindler, which what is now called, help me with
Seed.
Seed. I keep wanting to call them Church Outreach, CSO, but they transitioned in names. But we said, we got to complete, we got to complement, and we all kind of take different roles, and we just love the fact that we're completing and complementing. We're not necessarily in competition. Not that competition's bad. Sometimes it's very helpful, but it's that cooperative nature that we're working together, and we're kind of competing together, if you will, against
healthy competition, enemy. Like we talk about in the Christmanship book.
That's right.
Now, speaking of the books, we got about 5-6 minutes here. Let's go into that second stream real quick. This is one that most people are a little bit more familiar with. Or actually, let's save the second stream for last. Can we go in? Let's go into the third stream that the board presented to you real quickly.
Well, every ministry, every church has to have funding. And so we started to think about, what does that mean for us? And you go from having one staff person, which was me. Well, Martha was there as well as an office administrator.
She's another one that should be a staff emeritus with the work she put in.
Oh my gosh, we wouldn't be here today without her, that's for sure. But Martha was so faithful in helping us do all the administrative work. And now you go to, like I say, some 40 around the world. And how do you finance this thing? And a board of 9 or 12 people, that's a lot to fund. And so we've got to find new streams, and we're trying to do that by every staff person. You and I have to raise our own salaries. And let's put a plug out there. Anybody would love to support us. Both Andrew and I, we've been down. COVID has really hurt us this year, and we're down quite a bit. We still have to keep groceries on our table, and so we welcome you in that. But it's more than just that. It's how do we create resources, consulting, the videos, the training, the McGowan Institute master's level classes, these kinds of things that people can help us with what we call the economic streams, the economic engines, where people purchase something, they buy something, they are looking for some help with something. Yeah, so we've been trying to do that, and we've got some really great ways to do that. People can their Prime account and designate CSRM in
Amazon
your name or
Smile.
my name.
Yeah.
Any of those kinds of ways. We've got the telos that if you are a company or a business or somebody that uses credit card processing, they'll work to reduce your credit card processing fees and costs for your business. It'll be lower than it was, or they won't do it for you. I mean, if it doesn't make economic sense, then they won't do it. And then part of that, with your reduced cost, part of that then comes to CSRM. There's some unique ways that we have, and we're just on the front end. We can't even name anything yet because it goes beyond that. And if your church is doing what every church does, paying for utilities, renting, leasing, buying copiers, all kinds of things that this other group can help you save money on, and that money can come to CSRM. Now, of course, don't quit sending in your monthly checks. We need that, or getting your bank statement every month to give to CSRM. But we've got some of these creative things, and then we've got these resources that are for sale. And just so people know, the resources are basically at cost. What does it cost us to produce them? But that does include sometimes the people's time that it goes into producing it. But nobody's getting rich off of them, let me tell you.
And that's if you want more information on some of the different ways you can get involved financially, you can go to csrm.org. It's all laid out there. But the last stream, which we'll spend the last 3 minutes or so talking about, is the one that most of you probably, the reason you found out about us at CSRM is because of this stream, which is our resourcing, through Overwhelming Victory is our resource branch. You can go to overwhelmingvictory.org to see a lot of what we do there. But we have our own publishing house for books and print materials. We have our own video production house. We also have our own audio production house. All of these different things that have come about in the past. It's been what, Greg, 4 or 5 years since we published our first book?
2013 was our first book, the Christmanship book, but our publishing house, Overwhelming Victory Press, started about a year or two after that. And we have been on an average now of 2 to 3 books a year since then. I think we've got 11 in print right now, and 7 of them, I think, are Kindle. So we've been very, very pleased and privileged to do that.
Yeah, I believe Brian Mason's book, Maintaining Pace, which you mentioned earlier, it just now got Kindleized, correct?
Yeah, we're speaking here early in 2021, and it is on Kindle.
Yeah, and Kindleized, if that isn't a word, CSRM is trademarking it because we like to make our own language. But one thing, and this is a good place for us to wrap up, one thing that we are doing within our resource department, Dr. Linville is our chair for resourcing. He's the director of resource development. I serve with him as the director of digital resources. We have gone and added a new area of Overwhelming Victory. Those of you that are watching this know we have all of our videos, which our YouTube channel has hundreds of videos. And we are trying to recatalog them to make them a little bit easier for everybody to navigate. But we have also started with the CSRM podcast and the Reach Extended podcast, which was kind of the precursor. We have tried to start offering more audio content for those of you that drive long hauls. I know part of how we already talked about financing, but part of how I finance my operation is I drive a lot of gig work. I'm putting 200 or 300 miles on my car a day. I'm listening to podcasts nonstop. And so we know that this is something that is needed and something that makes it easier for you that just need background noise, but are also looking for resourcing. Overwhelming Victory Radio is our podcast network. We have a number of podcasts on there already. You can listen to the CSRM podcast on there. The Tuesday talks are all archived on there. The COVID conversations are all archived on there. Current Board of Trustees Chair Dwight McDowell and his wife, Angela McDowell's ministry, have a podcast on there called Call of a Mentor. We promised you Jamie Balcom's Cowtown Adventures back in January. There's been some minor delays there, but it's going to be coming out here soon. We also have some exciting new ones coming out, including one that hopefully will be out here with our pilot episode in the next couple weeks, called Ministry Misfits, that I am doing. And part of what we're wanting to do is to, like we talked about with our 3 streams, like we've talked about with everything that we do at CSRM, is to provide a theological, philosophical, methodological resource for you as the minister, to be able to equip you, to be able to train you, to allow you to have conversations with other members of the church staff, with your coaches, with your athletes, but to give you the opportunity to have this resource to help develop you spiritually, philosophically, academically, all these different areas.
Let's go on the next podcast to expand on some of that, and even bring people up to date where we're at on this re-envisioning process with our new directors and things like that. We've got a lot of great things happening within CSRM, and want to let you know what's happening.
Awesome. So we'll close this one out. Again, this is the special edition of the CSRM podcast. And as we close out, we're going to introduce you to the Ministry Misfit podcast. So stay tuned. More and more we hear about pastors and ministry leaders that feel like they just don't fit the mold of what the American church culture expects them to be. We look differently, we talk differently, we preach differently, and we even think differently. This is a very isolating feeling, and we often ask ourselves, how do I balance keeping my job and fulfilling my calling? You're not alone. Overwhelming Victory, Flix, and CSRM have developed a new podcast for ministers dealing with the current social and cultural issues here in the U.S. as well as within the church. Using our 3-tier paradigm, we are going to try and help ministers pull out the theological truths needed to boost their faithfulness to both their ministries and their callings. Hosted by me, the Ministry Misfit. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook as we prepare to launch our pilot episode Tuesday, April 6th on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Anchor FM, and of course, Overwhelming Victory Radio.